Do you remember walking into Woolworths at Christmas? When the aisles glittered brighter than the high street outside, the red and white logo over the door seemed to call you in, and inside, everything felt alive. Today, this chain belongs to the past, just like many other beloved names that swept away as the high street crumbled. Let's revisit 20 British shops that disappeared forever. One of them collapsed so quickly that 27,000 people lost their jobs overnight, right before Christmas. Keep watching to find out which one. 1. W.H. Smith. Your grandparents could never stroll down the high street without spotting W.H. Smith. It wasn't just a shop, it was part of the scenery. Back in the 60s, half the country bought their daily papers there, and kids marched in every September to grab jotters, rulers and tins of pencils. Grandpa might still recall clutching a puzzle magazine for a train journey, while Grandma popped in for a romance novel. Smith's had been around since 1792, first as a little stall at Euston Station, and it grew into a dependable friend on every corner. For decades, the blue and white sign felt like a guarantee that you could walk in and find whatever you needed, whether it was stamps, pens, or a paperback for the holidays. W.H. Smith lingers in train stations and airports, but the high street presence your grandparents knew has slipped into memory. But this next closure was even more heartbreaking. 2. Woolworths. Woolworths was everybody's friend on the high street. Known to most as Woolies, it had something for every pocket and every age. Children made a beeline for the pick and mix, filling paper bags with sweets until they split. Teenagers hung around the record racks hunting for the latest single, while mums swore by ladybird clothes for the little ones. For decades, Woolworths was part of growing up, part of every family trip into town. Your grandma might still laugh about sneaking you there for a bag of treats when mum said no, or buying decorations at Christmas when the aisles sparkled with toys and tinsel, but Woolworths couldn't keep up. By the 2000s, cheap shops and the internet pushed it to the edge, and the financial crash in 2008 finished it off. In the end, more than 27,000 people lost their jobs almost overnight, right before Christmas. This was one of the most painful closures in high street history, but this next chain's downfall was far more scandalous. 3. BHS British Home Stores. Your grandparents probably remember BHS as a Saturday ritual. Grandma might have gone in for curtains or school trousers, while Grandpa loitered by the tills, bags piling up in his hands. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. The kind of place families trusted for decades. For generations, BHS was part of the weekend routine, its windows stacked with deals. But the 2000s were unkind, and the brand fell behind sleeker rivals like H&M and Primark. Then came Sir Philip Green, who bought it in 2000 with promises of revival. Instead, he drained it dry. In 2015, BHS was sold for just £1 to Dominic Chappell, a man who later went to prison for tax fraud. By 2016, the shutters came down. 11,000 jobs were lost, and the pension fund lay in ruins. Your grandparents watched in disbelief as a once reliable name ended in disgrace. But this next one felt like losing a national landmark. 4. Debenhams. Debenhams wasn't just another store, it was an occasion. Your grandparents might tell you about dressing up to go there, walking through grand entrances into a world of perfume counters, shiny escalators, and endless racks of clothes. By the 50s and 60s, it was Britain's department store king, and its January sales were the stuff of legend. Families queued in the cold, waiting for the doors to open. Debenhams was woven into the rhythm of British life, the place where wedding outfits, new coats and Christmas gifts were chosen. But behind the glamour, debts mounted. By the 2010s, the grand halls echoed with fewer shoppers, and online rivals were stealing the crowd. When the pandemic came, it was the final strike. In 2021, after more than 240 years, Debenhams closed its last 124 stores. This next loss hit younger generations like nothing else. 5. Topshop. Topshop was youth in shop form. Your grandparents might remember the 70s when teenage girls swarmed the racks for miniskirts while Topman pulled in the boys. Its Oxford Street flagship was a fashion palace, buzzing every Saturday with kids trying to look their best. Under Sir Philip Green, Topshop soared, especially when Kate Moss walked through its doors in 2007 with her own collection. For a while, it felt unstoppable, but fashion is cruel. By the 2010s, Zara and ASOS pulled away and Topshop began to look tired. The pandemic sealed its fate. In 2020, Arcadia collapsed, taking Topshop down with it. More than 300 stores shuttered, and the high street lost its heartbeat for youth culture. Our next closure shocked families who had trusted it for generations. 6. Burton. Burton was the name generations of British men trusted when it came to suits. Founded by Montague Burton in the early 1900s, the chain promised quality tailoring at prices working men could afford. By 1929, it ran hundreds of shops, factories and mills. And after the Second World War, Burton became famous for its demob suits, sending thousands of servicemen back into civilian life with a sharp look. It even dressed England's football squad for the 1966 World Cup. Burton also birthed Topshop through its Peter Robinson subsidiary and owned a slice of Britain's retail giants, including Debenhams. For decades, a Burton suit was a mark of respectability, a milestone many young men achieved with pride. But Burton couldn't keep up, and by 2020 it was gone from the high street, and its fall led into the decline of another name your grandparents knew well. 7. Dorothy Perkins. Dorothy Perkins began in 1909 as a humble hat shop in Luton. It soon grew into a full women's wear chain, named after a popular rose. By the 1960s and 70s, Dorothy Perkins thrived, offering affordable fashion for women who wanted to look stylish without spending too much. At its height, it ran hundreds of stores across the UK, often sitting side by side with men's shops like Burton. For many women, it was the place to grab a dress for the weekend or work clothes on a budget. Your grandparents might remember Grandma strolling through its racks while Grandpa stood outside, carrying the bags with a sigh. But Dorothy Perkins lost its shine as new brands took over and online shopping pulled customers away. In 2021, Boohoo bought the name, closing every store. And with it went another brand that had once sparkled with youth. 8. Miss Selfridge. Miss Selfridge burst onto the scene in 1966 inside Selfridge's on Oxford Street. It was aimed at teenage girls during the swinging 60s with mannequins modelled on Twiggy and designs by Pierre Cardin. It quickly spread into its own chain, giving young women their first taste of glamour at affordable prices. By the 1980s and 90s, Miss Selfridge had become a high street staple, a place for party dresses and first date outfits. Your grandparents might recall your mum proudly showing off a glittery dress from Miss Selfridge before heading out with friends. It was a brand full of excitement, energy, and sequins. But as the years went by, it lost its sparkle. When Arcadia collapsed in 2020, Miss Selfridge was swept away too, with its stores closing overnight. Only the name survived online. And while it glittered once, the next shop meant much more to young families. 9. Mothercare. Mothercare opened in 1961, becoming the trusted destination for new parents across Britain. From prams and cots to tiny baby grows, it offered everything a family could need under one roof. By the 1980s and 90s, its name was everywhere, a symbol of reliability and care. Your grandparents probably remember buying their first pram there when your parents were born, wheeling it proudly down wide aisles lined with baby clothes. For decades it felt irreplaceable, a place wrapped in comfort and reassurance. But the 2010s were tough. Supermarkets undercut its prices, online shopping stole its customers, and the chain's big stores began to feel dated. By 2019, it had collapsed, closing its final 79 shops and cutting thousands of jobs. The brand survived abroad, but its presence at home was gone. And when Mothercare's loss felt emotional, the next shop's fall was almost embarrassing. 10. C&A. C&A was a Dutch import that settled into British life in 1922. Known for affordable clothes, it built a reputation through its lines like Clockhouse and Man at C&A. In the 1960s, it was considered fashionable. giving families a chance to dress smart without overspending. By the 1980s and 90s, though, C&A became the butt of jokes, especially among teenagers. Wearing a man at C&A suit was enough to earn teasing at school or in the pub. Still, it remained a fixture on the high street, and your grandparents might laugh remembering Grandpa proudly wearing one to work. By 2000, C&A gave up, shutting 113 UK stores and laying off thousands of staff. Its Oxford Street flagship was soon taken over by Primark. The name was gone, and with it, a piece of family shopping history. And if C&A ended in embarrassment, the next closure was pure cultural shock. 11. Athena. Athena was the shop of posters, the kind that turned a bare bedroom wall into a world of its own. From arty prints to the cheeky tennis girl or the famous image of a muscled man cradling a baby, Athena was where teenagers and students went to find a little personality. It started in 1964 and soon spread to over 160 stores, with those cardboard poster tubes becoming a familiar sight on buses and trains. Your grandparents might remember buying a print there to brighten up a first flat or a dorm room. For a time, Athena was the place where dreams and walls came together, but tastes changed. By the 1990s, its posters looked dated, and by 1995, the business collapsed. A few stores clung on, but by 2014, the last shop closed. The brand still flickers online, but the thrill of flipping through those racks is long gone. And where Athena faded away quietly, the next collapse was loud and unforgettable. 12th Blockbuster video. Friday nights in the 90s often meant one thing: a trip to Blockbuster. Families piled into cars, teenagers argued over titles, and shelves groaned under the weight of VHS tapes and, later, DVDs. The smell of popcorn lingered in the air, and those dreaded late fees became part of every household story. Blockbuster opened in the UK in 1989 and quickly spread to hundreds of stores. Your grandparents might recall queuing there on a Saturday evening, hoping the latest release hadn't already been rented out. For a while, it felt unstoppable, the centerpiece of family movie nights. But streaming changed everything. First came mail-order DVDs, then digital libraries, and suddenly, no one needed to visit a shop. By 2013, every UK store was gone, more than 500 of them closed forever. The end came fast and brutal, leaving a hole in weekend life. And if Blockbuster's fall felt inevitable, the next shop's collapse came with shocking speed. 13. Comet. Comet began in Hull in 1933, selling batteries and radios before moving into televisions, fridges, and appliances that transformed family homes. By the 80s and 90s, its big box stores stood across the country, stacked high with microwaves and video recorders. Your grandparents probably bought their first washing machine there, lugging home a box that seemed almost as big as the car. Comet was part of the rise of modern living, making electrical goods accessible to the average household. But rivals like Currys and Argos caught up, and online competition made the huge warehouses feel outdated. By 2012, it was all over. More than 200 stores shuttered, nearly 7,000 people lost jobs, and customers were left stunned at how quickly it disappeared. The chain had gone from everywhere to nowhere in a blink, and if Comet's sudden end shocked families, the next closure hit DIY lovers right in the heart. 14. Texas Home Care. Texas Home Care came along in 1972 and changed the way Britain did DIY. Its giant American-style sheds were filled with everything from paint to nails, timber to wallpaper. For families in the 70s and 80s, a trip to Texas was a weekend ritual. Your grandparents might remember pushing heavy trolleys stacked with planks while Grandma picked out wallpaper samples for the living room. At its height, Texas had over 200 stores and inspired a new wave of home projects. But competition was fierce, and the 80s recession left it wobbling. In 1995, J. Sainsbury bought the chain and folded most of the stores into Homebase. The name lingered a little while, but soon vanished. For DIY fans, the bright red Texas sign was gone, along with the excitement of those big box treasure hunts. And while Texas slipped into memory, the next closure broke children's hearts like nothing else. 15. Toys R Us. Few names light up childhood memories like Toys R Us. For kids in the 80s, 90s and 2000s, its stores were wonderlands. Vast warehouses where aisles stretched forever with dolls, bikes, action figures and video games. A trip there felt like Christmas on any day of the year. Your grandparents might recall taking you as a child, handing you the catalogue and letting you circle every toy you dreamed of. At its peak, Toys R Us had 100 stores across the UK, shaping birthdays and holidays for generations. But debts from its American parent piled up, and online shopping slowly stole its customers. In 2018, the shutters fell on its last UK stores, leaving families gutted. The famous jingle, "I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid," became a bittersweet memory. But if Toys R Us left children in tears, the next closure shook even the grocery aisles. 16. Safeway. Safeway arrived in Britain in 1962, bringing an American-style supermarket experience with wide aisles and shiny deli counters. By the 1980s, it had over 130 stores and became a strong rival to Tesco and Sainsbury's. Families would pile trolleys high with groceries, treating Safeway as part of their weekly rhythm. Your grandparents might remember doing the big shop there, wandering past the bakery section while debating which cheese to bring home. For a time, it felt like Safeway would never leave, a solid name on countless high streets. But by the 1990s, it was slipping behind its bigger rivals. In 2002, Morrison's bought the chain for billions and began rebranding every branch. By the mid-2000s, the familiar Safeway signs were gone, leaving only memories of family shopping trips. A whole supermarket giant vanished almost overnight. And where Safeway's end felt corporate, the next closure cut deeply into music lovers' hearts. 17. Our Price. Our Price was the place teenagers flocked to in the 70s, 80s and 90s. Starting in 1971 with a single shop, it grew into a nationwide chain packed with vinyl, cassettes and later CDs. Saturday afternoons often meant queuing up to grab the newest release, headphones on, listening before you bought. Your grandparents might smile remembering the day they bought their first album at Our Price, the sleeve clutched proudly on the bus ride home. It was more than a shop, it was a rite of passage for generations of music fans. But digital music and online downloads swept the high street clean. Even under new ownership, Our Price couldn't survive. By 2004, the shutters had fallen and its stores turned into Virgin megastores or disappeared altogether. For many, the loss felt like the soundtrack of youth was suddenly switched off. Now, if losing Our Price hurt, the next chain's collapse was even more painful. 18. Dolcis. Dolcis had been around since 1836, starting from a barrow in Woolwich, before growing into one of Britain's best-known shoe chains. By the 80s and 90s, it was everywhere, offering trendy yet affordable shoes for women of all ages. Many teenagers got their first pair of grown-up heels at Dolcis, while mums grabbed work shoes without breaking the bank. Your grandparents might remember taking your parents there, picking out sturdy school shoes before term began. Dolcis had become part of everyday life, its name familiar on almost every high street, but the 2000s were unkind. Competition from cheaper clothing stores selling shoes on the side cut deep into its business. When the financial crisis struck in 2008, Dolcis collapsed, shutting 185 stores and leaving staff out of work. The name returned briefly online, but the bustling shops were gone for good. And while Dolcis vanished quietly, the next shop's loss took something more unusual with it. 19. Past Times. Past Times was a little treasure trove that first opened in 1986. Its shelves were stacked with gifts, jewellery and trinkets inspired by history, from Celtic brooches to Art Nouveau notebooks. Walking inside felt like stepping into another era, each item carrying a story. By the 1990s, it had nearly 100 stores, and for many, it became the go-to place for quirky presents. Your grandparents might remember ducking into Past Times at Christmas, hunting for something unusual to wrap under the tree. For a while, it thrived, offering a charm no other chain could match. But as tastes shifted and online shops took over, it lost its magic. In 2012, Past Times collapsed, closing all its stores and leaving collectors disappointed. The name still lingers in memory. But the high street lost one of its most whimsical corners, and if Past Times disappeared quietly, the next closure was even more gut-wrenching. 20. Ted Baker. Ted Baker burst onto the scene in 1988 with a menswear shop in Glasgow. Quirky, stylish and playful, it quickly grew into one of Britain's most fashionable names. By the 90s and 2000s, Ted Baker stores were everywhere. Their interiors as witty and colourful as the clothes. Your grandparents might remember hearing younger relatives brag about their first Ted Baker shirt, a symbol of smart but stylish dressing. For years it looked untouchable, with shops buzzing across the country, but scandals and debts began to mount in the 2000s, and the shine wore off. By 2023, the chain had collapsed into administration, closing its final 46 stores and cutting hundreds of jobs. The brand survives online, but its high street presence is gone. The loss felt shocking, a modern giant gone in a blink. And with Ted Baker's fall, the long story of Britain's vanished shops finally came full circle. Which of these bygone chains do you remember most clearly? Let us know in the comments below. If you learnt something new, make sure to subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one.